The 911 call was brief, but the fear in the hiker's voice was unmistakable. "There's a car abandoned out here, and something smells awful." When officers pried open the trunk of the pale blue Mercedes-Benz near Lake Mead, the stench of death hit them first. Then came the sight of a man's lifeless body, crumpled like discarded luggage. Blood had seeped into his neatly pressed clothes, his face shattered beyond recognition. He was Dr. Thomas Burchard, a well-respected psychiatrist from California. But what was he doing here, dumped in the desert? And why had his final moments been so brutal? The car belonged to Kelsey Turner, a former model with a life of luxury and secrets. What investigators would uncover was more than just a murder. It was a story of money, manipulation, and betrayal, one that exposed the dark price of generosity. How did a brilliant doctor end up in a truck? And how far would someone go to keep their glamorous lifestyle alive? The truth was far more chilling than anyone could have imagined. Dr. Thomas Burchard had spent his life helping people. As a respected psychiatrist in Salinas, California, he was known for his dedication to mental health, working tirelessly to help those who had lost their way. With his round glasses, neatly combed hair, and a soft-spoken demeanor, he carried the image of a man who had seen the darkest corners of the human mind but never let them consume him. Yet, outside of his professional world, there was another side to Thomas Burchard, one that few understood. He had a tendency to help young women in need, offering them financial assistance, emotional support, and in some cases, even a place to stay. Some saw this as a genuine act of kindness, an extension of his work as a healer. Others, however, wondered if it was a dangerous habit, one that left him vulnerable to being exploited. It was through this generosity that Kelsey Turner entered his life. Kelsey was the kind of woman who could turn heads in any room. Tall, blonde, and strikingly beautiful, she had built a career as a glamour model, posing for magazines and curating an Instagram presence that showcased luxury, wealth, and beauty. But beneath the carefully edited photos and extravagant vacations was a life that was rapidly spiraling out of control. She had expensive tastes, designer clothes, high-end cars, and luxury apartments, but no real way to sustain them. Modeling gigs were inconsistent, and the world she wanted to live in required a steady flow of cash. That's where men like Thomas Burchard came in. Their relationship was a mystery to outsiders. What was a 71-year-old psychiatrist doing sending thousands of dollars to a woman half his age? Was it an arrangement of convenience or something deeper? What was clear was that for years Burchard had been footing the bill for Turner's lavish lifestyle, paying her rent, covering her expenses, and ensuring she never had to worry about money. But by early 2019, something had changed. Burchard, perhaps growing uneasy with the amount of money he was giving, began to pull back. The financial lifeline that had kept Turner afloat was suddenly fraying. And for a woman who thrived on wealth and control, this was unacceptable. By March, tensions between Burchard and Turner had reached their breaking point. He had traveled to Las Vegas to see her one last time, perhaps to discuss their arrangement, perhaps to say goodbye. What he didn't know was that he wouldn't be leaving alive. Waiting for him in Turner's home was not just the woman he had supported for years, but a violent plan he never saw coming. By March 2019, Thomas Burchard made a fateful decision. He would travel to Las Vegas to see Kelsey Turner one last time. Whether it was to end their financial arrangement, demand answers, or rekindle the relationship, no one knows for sure. But what is certain is that when Burchard walked through the doors of Turner's home, he was stepping into a trap. Kelsey wasn't alone. Inside the house was her boyfriend, John Kennison, and her roommate, Ayanna Penna. Both had become enmeshed in Turner's world of manipulation, luxury, and control. tensions boiled over almost immediately. Burchard had been paying Turner's rent, but now the payments had stopped. It was an argument months in the making. Kelsey, whose lifestyle depended on men like Burchard, wasn't about to let her source of income walk away without a fight. Somewhere in that house, between the anger and desperation, the confrontation turned violent. John Kennison, following Turner's lead, took action. A bat was grabbed, a blow was struck, then another and another. The respected psychiatrist, the man who'd spent his life helping others, was beaten until his skull fractured. As the blood pooled on the floor, panic set in. There was no turning back now. The man who had once been their benefactor was now a liability, a body that needed to disappear. In the chaotic aftermath, Turner and her accomplices scrambled to cover their tracks. They wrapped Burchard's body in a blanket and stuffed him into the trunk of his own car. His belongings were hastily gathered, his phone, wallet, and anything that could tie them to him. The group then drove the Mercedes-Benz deep into the Nevada desert, looking for a place where no one would find it. As they abandoned the vehicle near Lake Mead, they must have thought they had committed the perfect crime. The desert was vast and merciless. Bodies had disappeared out here before, never to be found, but they hadn't counted on the heat. The scorching Las Vegas sun accelerated decomposition, making the odor unbearable within days. A passing hiker noticed the foul stench seeping from the trunk and called 911. Within hours, detectives were swarming the scene, piecing together the horrific puzzle. Back in Las Vegas, Turner, Kennison, and Penna were unraveling. They had thought they were in control, but the weight of their crime was already catching up to them. Police were closing in, and it was only a matter of time before the truth came crashing down. Las Vegas homicide detectives arrived at the scene of the abandoned Mercedes-Benz, their faces grim. As they examined the gruesome discovery, Dr. Burchard's body showed clear signs of blunt force trauma, his skull fractured in multiple places. Whoever had done this had attacked him with terrifying brutality. The vehicle, though left in the desert, wasn't wiped clean. Police found a baseball bat with bloodstains, a roll of duct tape, and a stray hair extension, evidence that would soon become crucial. And then there was the connection to Kelsey Turner. The car was registered in her name, and witnesses in Las Vegas had already tipped off police about an unusual fight at her home just days earlier. Detectives moved quickly, tracking Turner to California, where she had fled after the murder. But she wasn't alone. With her were John Kennison and Diana Penna, both of whom had been inside the house that night. Investigators needed a break, someone willing to talk. That break came in the form of Diana Penna. Faced with mounting evidence and the possibility of spending life behind bars, Penna made a stunning decision. She turned on Turner and Kennison. She told detectives everything: how Burchard had been ambushed, how Kennison had wielded the bat, and how Turner had orchestrated the entire cover-up. With Penna's testimony and the damning physical evidence, police moved in. In April 2019, Kelsey Turner was arrested in Stockton, California. John Kennison was taken into custody soon after. Both were charged with murder, but the question remained, would justice be served? The trial of Kelsey Turner and John Kennison was more than just a legal proceeding, it was a spectacle. The courtroom was packed with reporters, legal analysts, and curious onlookers, all eager to witness the unraveling of a case that blended glamour, greed, and cold-blooded murder. The prosecution wasted no time painting Turner as a master manipulator. They described a woman who thrived on wealth, but had no means of sustaining it except through the generosity of wealthy men like Dr. Thomas Burchard The psychiatrist had supported Turner for years, paying her rent and expenses, but when he decided to cut her off, he sealed his fate. This was not a crime of passion, the prosecutor told the jury. This was premeditated. Kelsey Turner needed Dr. Burchard's money, and when she realized he was no longer going to provide it, she made sure he wouldn't be around to say no. The evidence was overwhelming. The abandoned Mercedes-Benz, still registered in Turner's name, had been filled with forensic clues. Blood spatter matched Dr. Burchard, and more damningly, a baseball bat recovered from Turner's home bore Kennison's DNA. The prosecution laid out a clear timeline how Turner lured Burchard to her home, how Kennison attacked him, and how after they all worked together to dispose of his body in the trunk of the car. The most crucial witness, however, was Diana Pena, Turner's former roommate. Pena had taken a plea deal in exchange for her testimony, and what she revealed in court shocked even seasoned trial watchers. She described in excruciating detail how Burchard had been ambushed in Turner's Las Vegas home. She recalled the terror on his face, the brutal swings of the bat, and the desperate attempts to clean up the evidence. She told the jury how Turner ordered the cover-up, making it clear that this wasn't just an accident, it was a calculated decision to eliminate someone who had outlived his usefulness. Turner's defense team fought back, arguing that she was a victim of circumstance, a woman who had been manipulated by Kennison and unfairly blamed for his actions. They painted her as a former model struggling to keep her life together, a single mother trying to survive in a world that judged women like her harshly. She did not kill Dr. Burchard, her attorney argued. She did not swing that bat. She did not put him in that trunk. But the jury wasn't convinced. After weeks of emotional testimony, closing arguments, and an exhaustive review of the evidence, they reached their decision. Guilty. Turner and Kennison were convicted, their once glamorous lives replaced with a cold reality of prison walls. Turner, who had spent years portraying herself as a woman of luxury, now faced decades behind bars. As the judge handed down the sentence, there was no more pretense, no more stage Instagram photos or carefully curated illusions. There was only the weight of justice, and with that the trial of Kelsey Turner and John Kennison came to an end. But for the friends and family of Dr. Thomas Burchard, the pain would never truly fade. With the verdict delivered and Kelsey Turner and John Kennison sentenced, the courtroom emptied, but the case's impact lingered far beyond the trial. The murder of Dr. Thomas Burchard was more than just another crime. It was a chilling reminder of how greed and manipulation could lead to deadly consequences. For Turner, prison meant the end of her glamorous facade. Once known for her striking beauty and curated social media presence, she now faced a far less forgiving reality. Behind bars, she was no longer the woman who had posed for magazines or flaunted an expensive lifestyle. Instead, she was another inmate stripped of luxury and control. John Kennison, who had carried out the brutal attack, found himself in a similar fate. His role in the murder had been undeniable, and while Turner may have orchestrated the crime, he had been the one who delivered the fatal blows. His loyalty to Turner had cost him his freedom, and there was no undoing the damage. But the greatest tragedy remained with Dr. Burchard's loved ones. His longtime girlfriend, Judy Earp, had been devastated by his murder. She had warned him not to trust Turner, believing that the young model was taking advantage of his generosity. But Thomas, ever the optimist, refused to believe the worst in people. He wanted to help her, Earp later said. He believed in giving people chances. He didn't deserve what happened to him. In the months following the trial, questions remained. How many others had been drawn into Turner's world of manipulation? How many had helped her financially, believing they were offering kindness only to be used and discarded? The media coverage of the case continued, dissecting every detail, the toxic relationships, the trail of lies, and the psychology behind Turner's actions. True crime enthusiasts debated whether she had planned the murder all along or if it had been a crime of desperation. For many, the case was a cautionary tale. It exposed the dark side of online personas, the dangers of blind generosity, and the terrifying lengths some would go to maintain control. But for those closest to Dr. Burchard, there was no mystery, only the heartbreaking reality of a life stolen too soon. In the end, justice had been served, but at what cost? The courtroom doors had closed, the sentences had been handed down, and the media frenzy had slowly faded. But for those left behind, the scars of Dr. Thomas Burchard's murder would never fully heal. In Salinas, California, where he had spent decades treating patients, the loss was profound. Colleagues and former patients struggled to understand how a man so dedicated to healing others had met such a violent end. His generosity, once seen as a virtue, had ultimately been exploited in the worst possible way. For Kelsey Turner, life in prison was a stark contrast to the world she had once inhabited. The designer clothes, the luxury vacations, the picture-perfect Instagram persona, all of it was gone. Instead of the carefully curated image she had built, she was now defined by her inmate number, her days filled with the monotonous routine of prison life. Reports from inside suggested that Turner had struggled to adjust. Accustomed to being in control, she now had none. Other inmates viewed her with a mix of fascination and scorn. Once a model, now a convicted murderer. Yet, even behind bars, Turner attempted to rewrite her own story. She maintained her innocence, casting herself as a victim of circumstance, a woman caught in a tragic series of events beyond her control. But the evidence, the testimony, and the brutal reality of what had happened to Dr. Burchard told a different story, one of manipulation, greed, and calculated deceit. Experts in criminal psychology weighed in on the case, dissecting Turner's behavior and motives. Many saw her as a textbook narcissist, someone who had used her looks and charm to manipulate wealthy men into funding her lifestyle. But when that financial support was threatened, her desperation turned deadly. John Kennison, too, was analyzed through a forensic psychology lens. Was he simply an accomplice blindly following Turner's lead, or had he harbored his own violent tendencies all along? The prosecution had painted him as a willing participant, but some believed he had been manipulated just as much as Burchard had, albeit in a different way. Diana Pena, the third player in this tragic tale, had cooperated with authorities and managed to escape the harshest punishments. Her role as a witness had been key to sealing Turner's and Kennison's fates, but her involvement in covering up the crime left lingering doubts about her own culpability. In the years that followed, the case of Dr. Thomas Burchard continued to serve as a grim warning. It was a story of how generosity could be exploited, how obsession with wealth and status could lead to ruin, and how one bad decision could spiral into a nightmare of violence. And that concludes the shocking case of Kelsey Turner and the murder of Dr. Thomas Burchard. What do you think? Was justice truly served? Or does this case still leave unanswered questions? If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another deep dive into the darkest corners of true crime. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and keep questioning everything.